20 set up, and now you are solving. And the first thing you do is you subtract 45x from both sides. So if you were doing this to justify it back here, if this was your one you picked, you might put subtraction property of equality, because we subtracted the same thing on both sides of our equation. And we now would have 1200 is equal to 1800 plus, how many x's do we have left? 15x. Our next step is that we are going to subtract 1800 from both sides. And we get 15x is equal to negative 600. And we're looking at this one, and we then are thinking, oh, so as we look at question 20, and it says, how many haircuts will she have given 1 month to make the same profit at each location? Okay? And you divide both sides by 15, you're thinking, oh yeah, division property of equality. And then what? So this again was the subtraction property of equality. And then we had our division property. And now, when we set this one up, if I would have made this, instead of it being a plus 45, right, that would have been minus. You would have added 45, let's think of it this way. This would have came out to be, because that's how much we're charging, we're taking that away from our rent, we're trying to find out when they're equal. You could have had it being, I would have taken this equation initially also. I would have taken, I'm charging 45x plus I have to subtract my rent of 1200. Some of you might have done it that way. I'm charging $60 a haircut and minusing 1800, done it that way. I would take it either way for those equations. But it doesn't make sense to say that you're going to have a negative 40 haircuts, right? So depending on how you set that up, just be really careful as you are thinking about that, okay? That's what I mean for the justify, though. You can't have a negative. This would have been negative divided by negative, and you would have told me we're going to pay the same amount if we sell 40 haircuts at each location, okay? What is absolute value? It is how far a number is from 0. How far a number is from 0. Now, when we think of distance, when you walk so far, even if you're walking backwards, is it ever negative? No. No. So how far from, you can walk backwards, but you're still, if you decide to walk backwards a mile, you're still walking a mile, right? If you walk forward, you're still walking a mile forward. You're walking backwards doesn't change, you're going a negative distance. You're just going in the opposite direction. So when we think of absolute value, this, if we find the absolute value of any given number, it is the distance. It's saying what number has a distance 3 units away from 0. That's what it's asking us. What number is 3 units away from 0? And there's actually 2 numbers, right, that are 3 units away from 0. Because if you think of your number line, here's 0, right? 3 units away, you're going to have negative 3 and you're going to have positive 3. Both are 3 units from 0. Okay? So when we talk about what is absolute value of 3, if I was writing this answer, I might write down what 2 numbers are 3 units away from 0, 3, and negative 3. And sometimes you're going to see this answer written this way. X equals plus minus 3. This is the same thing, right? This is positive 3, this is negative 3. That's what that plus minus means out in front. So when you look at those solutions, it's not telling you, this is just telling us one answer is positive 3 and one is negative 3. Okay, so if you fill that in on your notes, that's what we're thinking about for our absolute value. Now, we start pretty easy and they get difficult fast in this unit. Like this first one, it's pretty easy. It says recall that absolute value represents the distance from 0. Distance is always non-negative. So any equation that states that the absolute value of an expression is negative has no solution. Okay? That's key. Absolute value of a negative. I'll have students miss this all the time in their homework. If it comes out negative, it's no solution. So all of a sudden people will look at this one and go, oh, can I write no solution right away? No. Because you have to get the absolute value by itself first. You must isolate the absolute value first. I need this absolute value of n by itself first. To get absolute value of n by itself, I am going to use the addition property of equality, and I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And my answer is absolute value of n is equal to negative 2 plus 5, which gives us 3. So the absolute value of n is 3. It says split the equation to a positive case and a negative case. Now this one is pretty easy because the only thing inside our parentheses is n. But really soon, you get something like 2n plus 5 inside that absolute value sign. Or you get something like 5x minus 2 inside there. And then it gets more complicated and people make a few more mistakes. So if you keep going back to these steps, second step is to split it. So we are going to say n equals the positive case, which is 3, or we're getting rid of that absolute value sign, or n equals negative 3. And in this case, they ask you to solve and graph. So if you see your graph down below, that means we would put a solution at 3 and negative 3. And again, I don't care if you write it out like this for your solution, or if you prefer n equals positive negative 3, right? Same answer. That makes sense to everyone? Okay. That it's just written differently, but same answer. So, next page. We start getting uglier fast, right? This is where I was talking about inside that absolute value. The steps are the same. First thing you want to do is isolate your absolute value. That means I want this part all by itself. So outside of that absolute value, I have a plus 2, so I subtract 2. That would be subtraction property of equality. I now have absolute value of 2x equals the number by itself. I am splitting it to the two cases. One is positive, one is negative. I want you to notice this does not change. This is still 2x minus 5. This is 2x minus 5. Where does the negative go, the positive and negative? 13, and this is the opposite, negative 13. So the negative, when we think about that, it really goes with the number that was equal. And now you solve it two ways. How are we solving this? Like normal, you add 5, here you're adding 5, you're adding 5. Negative 13 plus 5 gives us negative 8. Positive 13 plus 5 gives us 18. We are then dividing division property of equality by 2. And I get my solution, 9 and negative 4. And you're thinking, oh man, I don't think this works, right? So we're going to show you how that check works also is with both of these. So it says when you isolate an absolute value of the number on the other side of the number line, it must be non-negative since absolute values cannot be negative. If it is negative, again, that key thing, no solution, because you're going to see that sometimes. But if I was going to check this, I'm going to do the check just kind of right up here. I'm going to show you that. So the check of this, I would put the absolute value of 2 times 9, right, minus 5, plus 2, and I was trying to check, does it equal 15? 18 minus, right, not 2 times 9 gives me 18 minus 5, so 18 minus 5 gives us absolute value of 13. The absolute value of 13 is 13, and 13 plus 2 equals 15. What if I check it with negative 4? Absolute value of 2 times negative 4 minus 5. This would give me negative 8. Negative 8, so inside that absolute value, I have an absolute value of negative 8 minus 5. Someone said, does an absolute value make them both positive? You're still doing -8 minus 5. You can't change it to like -8 plus 5. This is the absolute value of -13. How far is -13 from 0? 13. So 13 still plus 2 equals the 15. So it works in both cases. So the key thing for this test, when you get ready for this test, is just always know, always know that when you do this, you can check every single answer at all of our equations that we've done the last 2 days, right? You should not be necessarily, you can always turn to the back and look at those answers, but you can really quickly look and see if you're getting it. So, if we take a look at this problem, is the absolute value by itself? So when we are looking at this, we have absolute value of n plus 8 all by itself. We're going to split it into our 2 cases. One's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. The positive case says m plus 8 equals 5. The negative case is our other possible answer. We're going to put it as an OR. M plus 8 equals -5. So you're always changing the number that's outside. Please solve each of those right now. This can always be negative, right? These are my 2 solutions. M is equal to -3 and -13. What I cannot have equal is if this equals a negative. So we start this next problem and we look and we have absolute value of 4s, and I'm just going to change the s to an x because some of you, your s's look like 5s and then you think you're working with 545 or something instead of 4x, okay? So I'm just going to change that to an x. And as I start solving this one, my first step is I need to isolate my absolute value. We didn't have to do that here. It already was isolated. Greta, what do I need to do if I want to isolate that absolute value at 4x plus 1? I want to get this all by itself. I'm going to subtract 7 on both sides, right? Subtraction property of equality, right? So we do that subtraction, and Christian, we're going to end up with what? Tell me what to write. Absolute value. Okay. 4x plus 1
equals
-2. We've isolated our absolute value, right? Next step is we need to split it, correct? Okay. When we split it, if I'm looking at the split, Laura, what am I going to write? One's going to be the positive, right? One's going to be the negative. Okay, tell me.
4x plus 1 2.
Okay. If I'm doing the other side, Jack.
4x plus 1 equals -2.
Okay. Could we keep going from that? Don't. It was a trick. Did anyone catch it? Absolute value equal negative.
Oh, so don't do no solution.
Do not do that, right? You can't do that. It's equal to a negative. Absolute value will never, never, never equal a negative. So the biggest mistake that I'll have people do is they'll split it just like this. You can't split if absolute value equals negative. You can't measure negative distance, okay? Distance is always positive. So if this ever comes out negative, and it didn't at first, so it was a trick question for those of you that I was asking that. So just know that. It was not, you have to stop. And you can't, if this is negative, you can't have the positive and the negative of it because here you could, okay? So let's take a look at this next one. As you take a look at the next one. As we are looking at that one, Felix, start me out. Subtract 2. Oh, add 2, good. Opposite of subtracting 2, we got to get that absolute value by itself. We are going to add 2 on both sides. Okay? So, Freddie, we are going to be left with what?
Yeah.
Equals 7. Okay? Next step, as I am looking at it. What am I going to have next, Elise? There should be a plus 4, right? Okay, so tell me which one do I want to write down first? Okay, so tell me what to write. Now, h over 3, some of you might like to write that as 1/3 h, right? Does that make sense? 1/3 h or h over 3. You can write it that way. 1/3 times h plus 4, you said equaled 7. And Helen, what's our other one going to be?
1/3 h plus 4 equals -7.
1/3 h plus 4 equals -7. And most of your answers don't come out the same except for the really simple ones, like we did the very first example where they come out to be the exact same number but opposites. If you have anything inside this absolute value, they don't ever come out to be exactly the same numbers when we look at those. So you just got to be careful for that. So we are doing, the next step is to subtract 4 across all of them. But you're solving, instead of just one equation, you're solving 2 separate ones. We now have 1/3 h is going to be equal to 3. Here we're going to have 1/3 h is going to be equal to a negative 11, right? As we are taking a look at that, next step. What am I going to do next, Lulu, in the first one?
First one?
The 1/3 h equals 3.
Oh. We're going to divide by -3. No? Multiply by divide by 1/3.
Divide by 1/3. But I don't like writing division because it's so much easier. Division by 1/3 actually means to multiply by what?
Times
By its reciprocal, right? So division, I could write that, but what I really mean is I want to multiply by 3 over 1. And then on this side, I could just put 3, right? So 9 equals h. Because the 3's here cancel, that's 1 over 1. 3 over 3 is 1h. That was my goal. So on this next one, when I'm looking at that one, I'm looking at doing what? Times it by 3 again. And when you do that, you ended up with -33. And you're not sure you did it right, and you're looking at it, you're on the quiz, and just really quick, you put in 33 divided by 3. -33 divided by 3 gives us a -11. -11 plus 4 is going to give us 7. So by plugging this in just in my head, I could see that I get absolute value of -7, which is 7. 7 minus 2 is still 5. And now I plug in 9, and 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 3 plus 4 is 7, which means this whole thing is 7 minus 2, and so both of those work. And I just did a mental check, and I didn't actually write it out physically, but I know that I am understanding how that works. All right. This is the next section in your note, if you keep going with your notes. And in this problem, you're going to see situations like this a couple different times. So on A7, you're going to see a problem that looks very much like this. So the situation is this situation, and you're always going to set it up kind of in the same way. You start 100 feet away. A friend's skating towards you. She keeps skating. She skates at a constant rate, 20 feet per second. Her distance from you is in feet after t seconds is modeled by this equation. And what we are always looking at is your distance, d, is equal to, this is how many feet away. So if you put d equals absolute value of feet away from you, okay, and you're always going to set yours up in your homework. The homework question looks just like this. Feet away from you, okay? And then it's always going to be minus. Notice the 20 feet per second, that's how fast you were going. So minus the speed times t is always going to be our absolute value. So how many feet away from you that person starts off minus how fast they're going times t. And t and d, this d is going to be the distance. And if we were looking at this one, we want to know when the person is going to be 40 feet away, okay? So this is how far away, this was where they start, how far away they start. This is the actual distance, like the 40. So, since we're trying to see when they're going to be exactly 40 feet from you, we put that first. Equals the absolute value of 100 minus 20t. You're going to split it into the two equations. One equals positive 40, one equals negative 40. You're going to subtract the 100. Negative divided by negative. Here the time is 3 seconds. Here the time is 7 seconds. And the question is, how far, if they started 100 feet away and they skate towards you, right, if they're looking at that, when are they going to be exactly? So they come up to you, right, and then they keep going. So when are they 40 feet away? At 3 seconds and at 7 seconds, okay? You need to practice this one on that next one. So let's look at that. Here's what the equation looks like in your notes. You are skating with a friend. The distance from you after t seconds is this equation. What does the 80 represent in our equation? So if we are looking at that equation, look back at what we had before. Please write in, what do you think the 80 means? The 80 is what? How far away they started from you, right? So when we think about that, the 80 is they started 80 feet away from us, right? Starting distance from you. The 5 represents their what? Their speed. In this case, probably feet per second. It says, at what time will she be 60 feet from you? This is where you have to solve. The 60 feet, that's what D equals. So we are going to solve this equation. We are going to write 60 equals. Do you like the absolute value behind or in front of it? Because it doesn't matter. Like here it's 60 equals. Do you want me to put the absolute value in front or behind it?
Behind.
Keep it exactly the same. 80 minus 5t. We have to split it because there's two possibilities. If I was looking for the positive 80, what would you tell us?
80
Yep. Brody, what would our second equation be?
80 minus 5t equals
Yes. Solve each one of one of your answers, Lizzie. We take negative 20 divided by negative 5. T is equal to how many seconds?
negative
Oh wait, negative divided by negative should be positive 4 seconds, right? We're looking at that one, okay? Maya, on the other side, when you divided negative 140 by negative 5, how many seconds? $28. So 4 seconds and 28 seconds. Okay? So when you are looking at the problems in your homework, using what we put here for the notes, this might help you to figure that out when you set that up. So you are doing the first few ones, check your answers in the back, right? The answers are there, start checking them so you're looking at those. As you look at 7A, this is one of those distance ones, right? Be really careful for the negatives, okay?